This is CBS News Special Report. I'm Jeff Glor in New York. President Obama is about to speak in Poland about the ambush shooting deaths of 5 police officers in Dallas last night. 6 more were wounded. Margaret Brennan is awaiting the president in Warsaw. Margaret, good morning.
Good morning. Well, President Obama is here in Warsaw to tackle a number of national security issues here at NATO, but for the second time in less than 24 hours, he's going to be addressing the violence back home. It was last night, immediately upon arrival, that he first spoke out, saying he was deeply disturbed by what has recently happened in Baton Rouge and Minnesota, and called on Americans to really self-search here and look at some of what he called racial disparities embedded in the American criminal justice system. Hours later, that violence in Dallas erupted. So when we hear from the president shortly, he will be addressing those police shootings for what seems to be a developing situation that he has been briefed on throughout the night. Now, the president is currently in a meeting with some of the European heads of state here to talk about some of the national security issues, but this violence back home has followed him. He said just last night that he was on the plane, posted a Facebook message, then felt that he needed to directly speak to the American people, came to reporters' cameras and delivered some lengthy remarks, speaking without a teleprompter, speaking in many ways in what seemed from the heart, saying that he hopes that some of these racial disparities can be tackled in the lifetime of his children. But right now, he said Americans really need to look at this not as an issue for African American communities or for minorities, but broadly as an American justice issue. Jeff, so we'll be waiting for the president and his remarks shortly.
All right, Margaret, thank you very much. And just to recap here what has happened over the last 8 or 9 hours, if you have not heard about it. In Dallas last night, there was a protest over the police shootings that happened earlier this week in Baton Rouge and also just outside Minneapolis. There was protesters walking down the streets, marching down the street downtown, about a half mile from City Hall, and then this happened. Shots erupted, the crowd scattered there. You can see officers dive for cover while trying to stop what was happening there as everyone tried to protect themselves as best they can. You can see there is an officer down there. 3 people were taken into custody. There was then a standoff and a negotiation with another person who had a long rifle. That ended just a short time ago as that person apparently took his life. This happened, first started about 8:45 p.m. last night, as we said. The chief does believe 4 suspects were involved. It is unclear exactly how many weapons were involved, but Manuel Bojorquez is also in Dallas this morning. Manny, good morning to you.
Good morning, Jeff. We're keeping a close eye on this situation. It keeps evolving here. There were police blocking this intersection. Now that the standoff is over, it seems like they've moved their operation further into where the initial gunfire erupted and the parking lot where that 4th suspect was holed up and eventually killed himself. Let's bring you back to how this all started. The gunfire erupted with no warning Thursday evening as that march was happening in downtown Dallas. The downtown area turned into what can only be described as a war zone. There were about 800 people marching when it turned into chaos. Officials say the intent of the shooters was to kill as many police officers as possible. Demonstrators marching not far from City Hall ran for their lives as dozens of shots rang out. Police say this was a coordinated attack. There is also video that shows one shooter randomly firing a rifle over and over towards unseen targets. Police used their patrol cars for cover as they moved in to help wounded officers. The search for the gunman moved through downtown from buildings to restaurants, businesses and hotels. Dallas Mayor Mike Rawlings spoke earlier, and he talked about just the dedication of the men and women who are out here as police officers and the distress, the devastation the city is going through right now. Jeff?
Thank you very much from Dallas. We are again waiting for the president to speak about what happened in Dallas last night. He is once again in Warsaw, Poland. This protest in Dallas, again, to address the police shootings that took place in Baton Rouge and Minneapolis earlier this week. What happened in Dallas, as far as we can gather right now, is the deadliest event for police officers since 9/11. We do caution you, dawn has not broken in Dallas yet, so we don't know what else may develop. We don't know what else police may find. We don't know what else they will assess. But that is where we are at right now. 11 police officers were shot last night by at least 2 snipers. What appears to be right now, although this may change, 4 people involved in these shootings. And it's our understanding that at least 1 bystander was hurt as well in this gunfire. Margaret Brennan is standing by in Warsaw as we wait for the president here. Margaret, let's go back to you again.
Jeff, the president is just concluding a meeting with some European leaders as well as his secretaries of state and defense, John Kerry and Ash Carter, and we expect the president to address these police shootings. Just last night, we know on the plane ride here to Warsaw to these NATO meetings, the president was watching news coverage of what he has described as disturbing images of Baton Rouge and Minnesota, laying out what he called racial disparities within the American criminal justice system. He made those remarks publicly last night. Since the Dallas shooting, which happened just hours after he addressed the matter, we haven't heard directly from the president, but we do know he has been getting updates on this shooting. That's what the White House has been telling us. So we expect the president to make some remarks shortly. His reactions to these police shootings. Last night, his appeal was a very emotional one, saying and really making the case for what many protesters were out on the streets in Dallas trying to lay out here, a feeling that the American criminal justice system is somehow rigged against minorities and African Americans. The president has said this is something that should trouble all Americans. Hours later, this eruption of violence in Dallas. So the president's going to be very careful here. He's going to give his reaction, but we do know that this is something he feels very strongly about and has been monitoring, even coming here to this National Security Summit here in NATO. He's been tracking all of this violence back home. So this will be the second time in less than 24 hours that the president has had to address some of these racially motivated, as he described them, frustrations. So let's listen to the president now talk about Dallas.
Let me begin by thanking Presidents Tusk and Juncker for the opportunity to meet today. With your understanding, I want to begin with a few words about the situation back in the United States, specifically the situation in Dallas, Texas. My team's been keeping me updated throughout the morning, the evening in Dallas. I spoke this morning with Mayor Rawlings of Dallas to convey the deepest condolences to the American people. I told him that the federal government will provide whatever assistance Dallas may need as it deals with this tremendous tragedy. We still don't know all the facts. What we do know is that there has been a vicious, calculated, and despicable attack on law enforcement. Police in Dallas were on duty doing their jobs, keeping people safe during peaceful protests. These law enforcement officers were targeted, and nearly a dozen officers were shot. 5 were killed. Other officers and at least 1 civilian were wounded. Some are in serious condition, and we are praying for their recovery. As I told Mayor Rawlings, I believe that I speak for every single American when I say that we are horrified over these events and that we stand united with the people and the police department in Dallas. According to police, there are multiple suspects. We will learn more, undoubtedly, about their twisted motivations. But let's be clear, there is no possible justification for these kinds of attacks or any violence against law enforcement. The FBI is already in touch with the Dallas police, and anyone involved in these senseless murders will be held fully accountable. Justice will be done. I will have more to say about this as the facts become more clear. For now, let me just say that even as yesterday I spoke about our need to be concerned as all Americans about racial disparities in our criminal justice system. I also said yesterday that our police have an extraordinarily difficult job, and the vast majority of them do their job in outstanding fashion. I also indicated the degree to which we need to be supportive of those officers who do their job each and every day, protecting us and protecting our communities. Today is a wrenching reminder of the sacrifices that they make for us. We also know that when people are armed with powerful weapons, unfortunately, it makes attacks like these more deadly and more tragic. And in the days ahead, we're going to have to consider those realities as well. In the meantime, today, our focus is on the victims and their families. They are heartbroken. The entire city of Dallas is grieving. Police across America, which is a tight-knit family, feels this loss to their core, and we're grieving with them. I'd ask all Americans to say a prayer for these officers and their families. Keep them in your thoughts. And as a nation, let's remember to express our profound gratitude to our men and women in blue, not just today, but every day. With that, I want to thank Presidents Tusk and Juncker for our work here today in Warsaw.
President Obama speaking and reacting for the first time to those fatal shootings in Dallas, really trying to calm Americans back home, saying federal assistance will be given to leaders in Dallas, said he was horrified, called the motivations of the killers of those 5 policemen twisted, saying there is no justification for any kind of violence, particularly against the police, as they were trying to oversee what was meant to be a peaceful protest. So the president also trying to qualify the remarks he made yesterday, saying, yes, there are racial disparities in the American justice system, but the jobs given to the men and women within the police force is an extraordinarily difficult one, and today is about mourning those lives lost. Today is about supporting them, and really tried to unify and qualify some of the remarks he made yesterday, just hours before that Dallas shooting. So the president also said he will be speaking to the American public again as he gathers information. And interestingly there, Jeff, he also pointed to another politically charged issue back home, and that is access to high-powered weaponry and rifles that were used in that assault in Dallas.
All right, Margaret Brennan, thank you very much from Warsaw. And Dallas police continue to gather information as well, and also conduct a careful and complicated search in downtown Dallas, because the suspect, who apparently just killed himself, said he intended to hurt more and that he left bombs around the city. So Dallas police are very carefully sweeping the city for any sort of explosives, potential explosives, after this horror that unfolded last night just after 8:45 p.m. when snipers shot 11 Dallas police officers. 5 of them are dead this morning. 6 are injured. We are going to have much more on this story ahead at 7 o'clock on CBS This Morning. Scott Pelley is in Dallas. He will lead our coverage from Dallas today. We'll hear from witnesses, and we'll talk to the Dallas mayor and also the head of the NAACP. You can get the latest throughout the day on our 24-hour streaming network, CBSN. This has been a special report. I'm Jeff Glor in New York.
For news 24 hours a day, go to CBSNews.com.